Hello my dears, welcome back to Let It Cook cooking channel. Today we're making a German classic, beer goulash. How do we make it? For that we need salt, broth, smoked pork belly and clarified butter. Here we have a cellar beer, bay leaves, lemon, caraway, oregano, hot paprika, tomato paste, juniper berries, pork neck and finely chopped onions. I bought a pork neck here that's well marbled with fat, which I think is great for this dish. This pork goulash is better with a bit of fat, making it softer and more tender. Here I have some smoked pork belly and I'm going to cut it into small cubes now. I prefer it when you cut it yourself because those pre-made cubes are always so shredded and messy. So now just cut it down a bit here into strips. With a beer goulash like this, it can still be clearly visible. Maybe we'll cut these things in half again. They're a bit too long now. I probably should have done that earlier. Cut them into nice big chunks. They can be a bit rough. By the way, I sliced the onions with one of those mandolins. Maybe you know them, or one of those V-slices from the pedestrian zone, whatever you have at home. Make sure they're nice and thin. The thinner they are, the more likely they'll cook down completely. You'll get a nice creamy sauce. Yeah, I've heard from people with the other goulash recipe that their sauce was still too runny. It depends on two things. First, cutting the onions finer makes them dissolve and thicken the sauce. Second, cooking with the lid on for too long. What's the difference between cooking with or without the lid? If you put the lid on, the liquid stays in and the condensation keeps dripping back into the goulash. Yes, but you should let it simmer occasionally to enhance flavor, which is why you sometimes remove the lid. Yes, and now we're cutting the neck into slices about 3 centimeters thick, so pretty substantial pieces. I just pressed the last one down a bit so that all the pieces are about the same size, yeah. There. And now we're going to cut some really nice cubes from it. Okay, my dears, we're starting really hot pot. Now we add half of the meat, throw it into the hot butter. I've already heated it up a bit, and half of the bacon. With a large enough pot, you can do it all at once like he's doing now. He says not to sear meat for the other goulash, but here he does. There's a simple reason. This has a lot of fat, and I want to render out some of the fat. It's also not such tough muscle meat, so it doesn't need to cook as long. And I want to have that roasted flavor in my sauce. That's why I'm searing the meat properly here. Unlike the other one, this will be seasoned right away with salt and pepper. Since there's bacon, use less. Bacon adds plenty of flavor. Take a look. You could almost have roasted it all at once. Depending on your pot size, this one's huge, while yours at home is likely smaller. It's best to cook in 2 batches. Creating rich roasted flavors will also make the sauce tastier. By the way, people used to say you sear the meat so the pores close. That turned out to be complete nonsense. Yeah, that's how I learned it too. Nothing closes, the pores remain open. But it just gives a different flavor. You just don't get that roasted aroma in there. And that's mainly what it's about. When it's roasted to a golden yellow, as shown here, we'll take it out, put it on a plate. I'll saute the other thing, and we'll meet in a moment. We'll cook the onions now. I'll fry the other meat in the back to save time and work in parallel. Add the onions here. And if it starts getting too brown at the bottom, yeah, as you can see here, then just add a splash of broth and let the browned bits from the meat loosen up a bit. You don't want it to burn black or your sauce will taste bitter. As you can see, it's loosened up nicely now. So only do this if it has gotten too brown. And now we're going to let the onions sweat nicely here. Yeah, probably for as long as the meat. So they can really cook down nicely. I'll show you in a moment. Everything is nicely browned. The onions are steaming at full blast. Yeah, it smells great in here. And now just add the meat in here. By the way, in case you're wondering why there's so much juice in there, it wasn't bad meat. It's just that I deglazed the pan I use for frying with a bit of broth so I can really get all the flavors out. The puddle is here for that. Let's get it sizzling nicely again. You probably already know this. First, add the tomato paste and let it fry. Now I have some Hungarian hot paprika powder here. This depends on your taste. If you prefer less spice, use the sweet one from the supermarket or make it spicier like I do. You don't mind, so use the rose hot one and it'll turn out like this. And now let's add some power. First we'll pour the beer on it. Let's add a bit of caraway. Caraway is always very good for digestion, especially with pork. Caraway and parsley help us digest the pork fat a bit better. That's why in Bavaria, roast pork sauces and everything made with pork are often prepared with caraway, because it just makes it a bit easier to digest. Then we add a small pinch of oregano. Marjoram works too, depending on what you have at home. Then we have the 3 bay leaves here and the juniper berries. You can press down on the juniper berries a bit if you want, just with a knife or something, so they get slightly crushed. If you're a good host, you remove the juniper berries or just put everything in a tea bag. My experience is that the tea bags don't bring out the flavors as well as when you just cook them directly, but I just pick them out afterwards. And then we add a splash of the beef broth on top. Just enough so that everything is roughly covered. And now we'll let the whole thing cook with the lid on for about 3/4 of an hour. Then we'll take the lid off. Another 20 minutes. Be careful not to overcook it. The biggest mistake with this dish is letting it cook too long. It falls apart and looks like pulled pork, which we don't want. We want visible pieces like it is now. Now you can see that there are a lot of big pieces in here. Start with the lid on, and then we take the lid off and let the sauce cook down until it has a really nice creamy goulash consistency. If it's not creamy enough for you, you can also mix a spoonful of cornstarch with a little bit of beer. Use that to thicken it. I'll show you soon. I need to cook it for about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. See you soon. I've cooked it for 1 hour and 10 minutes. At the end, I mixed a bit of starch with beer, 2 tablespoons of potato starch mixed with beer, and thickened the sauce a little. It was a bit too runny for me as well. Unfortunately, the camera didn't catch that. That's why I have to tell you about it now. You'll just have to take my word for it. Just like that. I'm sure you've seen me do it before. Put a bit of starch into a small bowl, mix it with a little beer, and then use it to thicken things up a bit. Yeah, you see, I have quite a lot of sauce, but I actually think that's great for a dish like this. You can make spadsel or bread dumplings to go with it. I'll link the bread dumpling recipe so you can cook it with this. Or the spadsel dough, I have that on my channel too. You'll find all sorts of things there. And now let's plate it up. I was just looking for the bay leaves and the little berries. Sure, there's still a bit left in there. I don't have any now. No side dish with it today? But you can just take something for yourselves. And now just a little tip, since this whole dish is pretty heavy, pretty fatty, pretty rustic, and to lighten it up a bit, just grate a little lemon zest over it. So just a little, really fresh, not too much, that's it, that's enough. That adds a fresh kick and makes it taste completely different. Now, as always, there's just one thing left. I'll try it. Let's see if it's nice and juicy. Cheers. It's buttery soft. Please don't cook it for too long. We don't want pulled pork, just a little. The cubes will stay together and melt in your mouth, so there's nothing to worry about. Cooking takes 1 hour or up to 1 hour and 10 minutes. We've added parsley on top, and you could also add a dollop of sour cream. Mine turned out pretty spicy now with this hot paprika. If you prefer it sweeter, as I mentioned before, give this dish a try. This is really a relatively inexpensive, very simple traditional goulash dish that tastes really, really delicious. Have fun cooking. See you next week, my dears. Take care. Ciao, service.